Well, hello again, everyone. Mr. Reeves with you today, and today we're looking at multiplying integers. So this lesson is lesson 2.1 on page 37 in your Math 7 textbook. So let's just go ahead and dive in. So let's talk about what multiplication is. All right, so back in elementary school, when you learned your multiplication tables, the whole point of learning to multiply is actually to learn to add in a much quicker way. Multiplication is simply adding the same number over and over and over again. So since we get the same result every time, we memorize our multiplication table. So say we wanted to do 7 plus 3, or excuse me, 7 times 3, instead of going 7 plus 7 is 14 plus 7 is 21, we simply memorize that 7 times 3 is 21. So again, multiplication is repeated addition of the same number. Now it gets a little more tricky when you throw in multiplying negatives, but it's the same idea with a slight modification when we have to multiply a negative by a negative. All right, so we're going to take a look at multiplication on the number line. We're going to take multiplication using counters and then just do some practice problems of multiplication. So here we go. So again, I am on page 37 in your textbook. They start off with the example right here, 3 times negative 2. All right, so what this means, as is written, is 3 groups of negative 2 being added together. So if we take a look to graph this, whoops, let's get it full screen. To graph negative 2, you would start at 0 and move 2 units to the left. So here is 0. So there's our negative 2. But 3 times negative 2 means negative 2 plus negative 2 plus negative 2, right? All right, so you move 2 units to the left 3 times. So we get negative 2 plus negative 2 is negative 4, and negative 4 plus negative 2 is negative 6. All right, so Henry made 3 withdrawals, $2 each. What was the change in his balance? The change in his balance was $6. Now it went down $6. Whoops, goodness, that's pretty bad. It went down $6. So we might represent that answer as a negative 6. That was the change. But keep in mind, you can't really have a negative amount of money. You can owe money, but it went $6 down. I'm not quite sure how they would have us represent that. So when you guys go to do the online assignment, make sure you look at the example to see if they want you to put 6 or negative 6 for that answer, because the answer to the math problem is negative 6 because it went 6 down. All right, here we go. Lisa plays a video game in which she loses points. Poor Lisa. She loses 3 points 6 times. So if you look up here, we did 3 times negative 2. Now we're going to do 2 times negative 3. 2 groups of negative 3, right? So 2 times negative 3 means negative 3 plus negative 3. So they said to show this on the number line. All right, so if I were to go to the number line, I would start at 0 and I would go negative 3. And then I would do it again and go negative 3 more. All right? And when I do that, let's see where we end up. We end up at, let me change the color here to this beautiful green. We end up at negative 6, right? So Lisa has a score of negative 6. All right, no question, this one is definitely negative 6 as the answer we express it. All right, so what did we see? We saw that when we did 3 times negative 2, we got negative 6. And when we did 2 times negative 3, we got negative 6. So this positive times this negative was a negative. So a positive number of negatives gave us a negative answer. A positive number of negatives gave us a negative answer. All right. Okay, so what about if we take a look at counters? All right, so remember, a yellow counter is 1 and a red counter is negative 1. So if we take a look at this right here, we have three groups of negative 4. Three groups of negative 4. So three groups of negative 4 is negative 4, right? We have negative 4 plus negative 4 plus negative 4. And when you put those together, what do you get? You get negative 12. So what does that show us? That shows that 3 times negative 4 is negative 12. All right, now, this one we already know, don't we? Okay, I know I'm doing this a little different than the book intended, but I just want to go over it this way. All right, what do we have here? Here we have three groups of positive 4, right? So we have 4 plus 4 plus 4. So 3 times positive 4 would be positive 12, okay? So a positive number of negatives gives you a negative, right? So again, a positive times a negative gave us a negative answer. We also saw that a negative times a positive could give us a negative answer, and a positive times a positive is going to give us a positive answer because you're just going to get more and more and more yellows, right? And these ones you're just going to get more and more and more reds. You remember when we started with addition, we only did the same thing, right? The same thing over and over and again. All right, so these represent, these two here, what we have here, they represent all red, right? All red. And this one right here represents all yellow. So when you have all red, the answer is going to be red. And when you have all yellow, the answer is going to be yellow. Okay? So with counters again, if we come back here to the two color counters, let's say I wanted to do 4 times negative 3. I wanted to do 4 times negative 3 with the counters. All right, so here we go. 1, 2, and I'm going to put them together. All right, there's negative 3, right? That's one group of negative 3s. Here's two groups of negative 3s. Here's three groups of negative 3s. And here is the fourth group of 3 negatives, right? So this problem right here represents 4 times negative 3. And what do we get? We get negative 3 plus negative 3 plus negative 3 plus negative 3, which is negative 12. Again, a positive times a negative gave us a negative answer, and 4 times 3 is 12. Okay? So hopefully you guys can see, and it makes sense here, that when you have a positive, which tells you how many you have, of negatives, you get a negative answer every time. And it doesn't matter if you switch the order around, right? Okay, 3 negative 2's gave us the same result as 2 negative 3's because multiplication is commutative. All right, where it gets tricky is when you want to multiply a negative times a negative, right? So again, just as a reminder, we said a negative times a positive gives us a negative. We said a positive times a negative gives us a negative. A positive times a positive gives us a positive. But what about a negative times a negative? Okay, and how do you show that with counters, and how do you show that on the number line? Well, this is where it gets tricky, all right? Because we were saying that this positive number every time told us how many groups we had, right? But you can't have a negative number of groups. Okay, so this is where the idea of opposite comes in. So if we actually go to the book as what they were doing on this application, I kind of just brushed by it. They want us to multiply negative 3 times negative 4. And this is the key. It says write negative 3 as negative 3 times negative 4 as this, which means the opposite of 3 times 4. All right, now you notice when you look at these ones are in parentheses and these ones are not. All right, that what they're saying is take these two here, and multiply those together, and then take the opposite of that, okay? So the opposite of 3 times negative 4. The opposite of 3 times negative 4. All right, so what we had here was 3 times negative 4, we already said was negative 12, right? And the opposite of that, they take that and just make everything the opposite, and you get them to be positives, all right? So the opposite of negative 3 times negative 4 is a positive 12, or a negative times a negative is a positive. So kind of clever if you think about what they did, right? Again, they said this represents 3 groups of negative 4, but we want the opposite, right? We want the opposite here. We want the opposite. That's not what I want. How about a highlighter? We want the opposite. There we go. The opposite of negative 3 times 4. So I take 3 times negative 4, which is all reds, and then I simply make them yellow. Okay, if we had those double-sided counters, we would just flip them all over. All right, and this side would be the yellow side. All right, but what about on a number line? What would that look like on a number line? How could we do a negative times a negative? All right, well, let's say we wanted to do 3 times, negative 3 times negative 4. Well, let's look at this as the opposite of 3 times negative 4. Okay, so if we were going to do 3 times negative 4, this is what we would do, right? Let's get back to our, our straight lines, not dotted, and let's do the arrow. So if we were going to do 3 times negative 4, we'd start at 0, right? And we would go negative 4, right? And then we would go 4 more negatives to negative 8. And then we would go, whoops, I didn't quite make it. Pretend I made it, okay? Another one to negative 12. And then, oh, we just said 3, didn't we? You know what? Let me just try this again. All right, let's just get rid of these and try this again. All right, and I'm going to make it blue, not green. So here we go. So we want to do 3 times negative 4. So 3 times negative 4, I'm going to start at 0. There is 1 negative 4. There is 2 negative 4s to negative 8, and then there is 3 negative 4s. All right, so that would get us to negative 12. So 3 times negative 4 is negative 12, right? But we want the opposite of that. So what do we need to do? We need to go in the opposite direction, right? So instead of ending up at negative 12, we need to end up at positive 12. We need to go the other direction, okay? So negative 3 times negative 4 is negative 12. All right? A negative times a negative is a positive. A negative times a negative is a positive. All right? Okay. So when you want to look at negatives times negatives on the counters, just do a negative times a positive and then flip them over. When you want to look at it on a number line, okay, you do the problem and then you go the opposite direction. Okay, what if we just want to look at some problems without using the number line or the tile? All right, so what if I just want to do 3 times negative 5 or negative 10 times negative 2? So up here at the top of the page, I'm going to write these down again, okay? So I'm going to just write down what results that we get. We found out that a positive times a negative gave us a negative. We also found out that a negative times a positive gives us a negative. We also found out that a positive times a positive gives us a positive. And finally, the tricky one, a negative times a negative is a positive. Okay, that's all you need to know, and that in your times tables, of course. All right, so I know that 3 times 5 is 15, okay? But a negative times a positive is a negative, okay? I know that 10 times 2 is 20, but a negative times a negative is a positive. By the way, you don't have to put the plus for positive. I'm just putting it to emphasize. All right, I know that 0 times anything is 0. And guess what? 0 isn't negative or positive, so we're good. I know that 8 times 4 is 32, and a positive times a positive is a positive. All right, so you see how easy this is? Okay? All right? So as long as you know how to multiply, you just really have to know those sign rules, and they're really not that complicated, are they? I know that 3 times 100 is 300, and I now know that a negative times a negative is a positive. Okay? I know that 4 times 15 is 60, and I know that a negative times a positive is a negative. All right, and then some word problems, and then we're done. Flora made 7 withdrawals of $75 each. What was the overall change in her account? Okay, so if she does 7 withdrawals of 75 each, I need to do 75 times 7. All right, so 7 times 5 is 35. Carry the 3. 7 times 7 is 49. 49 plus 3 is 52. All right, so the overall change in her account was it went $525 down. Let's try that again. D-O-W-N. All right, so I'm thinking that the textbook, if we were doing this online, would want us to write negative $525. Again, when you guys go to the online textbook, I encourage you to view an example, or if they mark it wrong, go back and just do it again, do another one, and then put the negative in there. But I'm pretty sure they would want a negative answer on that. What about this one? Last one. The temperature dropped 2 degrees Fahrenheit for every 6 hours. What was the total number of change in degrees for 6 hours? Well, 6 times 2 is 12. But since it was dropping, that would be a negative. So we're looking for negative 2 times 6. So the answer would be negative 12 degrees Fahrenheit. All right. Okay, well, I hope this video helped you understand the meaning of multiplication with positive and negative integers. As always, if you need more help, make sure you reach out to me. All right, guys? Have a great day. I'll see you next time. Bye.